Construction. Workers mocked the old man's tools until he built what their machines couldn't act. The Historic Preservation District renovation project had attracted attention from the moment the city council approved it. The old Carnegie Library, built in 1908, abandoned in 1974, left to decay for 50 years, was finally being restored to its original grandeur. Modern money meeting historical architecture, with all the complications that implied. Raymond Fischer stood at the building's entrance, surveying the organized chaos of a major construction site. He was 79 years old, built lean and weathered like old wood left to cure. His hands were scarred and calloused, marked by decades of work that showed in the topographical map of old cuts, burns, and the particular thickness that came from gripping tools since childhood. He wore canvas work pants, a faded chambray shirt with pearl snaps, and steel-toed boots that had been resoled so many times the cobbler knew him by name. Beside him sat a wooden toolbox, not modern plastic with organizational trays, but genuine wood, dovetailed corners, brass hardware, handles worn smooth by decades of carrying. The tools inside were equally anachronistic. Hand planes with rosewood handles, chisels sharp enough to shave with, levels and squares made before digital readouts existed, a brace and bit set that looked like museum pieces. Raymond had been hired as a specialty consultant, brought in by the architectural preservation firm overseeing the project because the original building plans showed decorative woodwork that modern contractors couldn't replicate. Crown moldings with hand-carved acanthus leaves, wainscoting with custom profiles, a grand staircase with newel posts and balusters that were individual works of art. But the general contractor's crew didn't know that yet. They just saw an old man with outdated tools standing in their workspace. "Hey, Pops!" The voice came from Jake Hendricks, the site foreman's nephew, 26 years old, and confident in the way of young men who'd never been seriously wrong about anything. He wore a hard hat with stickers from various tool manufacturers, a vest covered in pockets, and the kind of safety glasses that cost more than Raymond's entire outfit. "You looking for someone? Senior Center's about 3 blocks that way." A few other workers laughed. They were setting up for the day, unloading equipment from trucks, running extension cords, positioning laser levels and pneumatic tools. The site hummed with the sound of generators and compressors, the electronic beeping of machinery in reverse, the metallic clanging of scaffolding being assembled. Raymond didn't rise to the bait. He'd learned long ago that responding to disrespect with anger was pointless. "I'm looking for Bill Crawford. I'm the woodworking specialist he hired." Jake's eyebrows rose. "You're the specialist? No offense, but..." He gestured at Raymond's toolbox. "Those tools are older than my dad." "Older than your grandfather, probably," Raymond agreed mildly. "Some of them date back to the 1940s. They work just fine." "Yeah, but we've got, technology now." Jake walked over to a workbench where his own tools were arranged with obvious pride. CNC router, pneumatic nailers, laser-guided saws, digital angle finders. We can cut wood to tolerances of a 64th of an inch, perfectly consistent, all day long. He picked up a cordless drill that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. "This thing has 17 different speed settings, built-in level, LED work light, and enough torque to drive screws through steel. What have you got?" Raymond looked down at his toolbox, then back at Jake. "Experience." The workers within earshot laughed again, not cruelly, but with the easy dismissiveness of people who thought they knew better. Modern tools were better tools. Everyone knew that. Progress was progress. Bill Crawford emerged from the building's interior, a man in his 50s with the harried expression of someone managing a project with too many moving parts and not enough budget. When he saw Raymond, relief washed over his face. "Ray, thank God. I was worried you'd gotten lost." He shot a look at his crew. "This is Raymond Fischer. He's here to handle the detailed woodwork, the stuff that actually makes this building historically accurate, instead of just a modern building wearing old building cosplay. You treat him with respect, you listen when he talks, and you stay out of his way when he's working. Clear?" "Clear, boss," Jake said, though his tone suggested he thought Bill was being overly cautious. "But just so I understand, what can he do that we can't? We've got every tool known to man on this site." Bill gestured for Raymond to follow him inside. "Come on, I'll show you." They entered the building's main hall, a soaring space with damaged plaster walls, a floor covered in construction debris, and gaps in the ceiling where water damage had destroyed original materials. But the bones were still there, the proportions, the windows, the ghost of what it had been. Bill led Raymond to the grand staircase, or what remained of it. The lower section had survived, showing intricate woodwork that made Jake, who'd followed them in, Actually pause and look closer. The newel post was a masterpiece, carved from a single piece of oak, featuring acanthus leaves that seemed to grow organically up the post, with such delicate undercutting that light and shadow played across the surface like water. The balusters were each unique, hand-turned with subtle variations that gave the whole assembly a living quality. The upper section was destroyed in a roof collapse in 1988, Bill explained. We need to recreate it, exact match to the original. That means hand-carved, hand-turned, using the same techniques they used in 1908. He looked at Jake. Can your CNC router do that? Jake studied the newel post, his confidence wavering slightly. I mean, we could scan it, program the router, replicate the pattern. You could replicate the shape, Raymond said quietly, but not the spirit. Look closer. He moved to the newel post, running his fingers over the carved leaves with the familiarity of someone reading Braille. See how the depth of the carving varies slightly? How some leaves catch more light than others? How there's a rhythm to it, but not perfect symmetry? This was made by someone who understood wood as a living material, who worked with the grain instead of against it, who made thousands of small decisions during the carving process based on how the wood responded to the tools. He turned to face Jake. A CNC router makes identical cuts, perfect, consistent, dead. This is alive. That's the difference between manufacturing and craftsmanship. Jake looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't quite find the angle. Bill jumped in. The Preservation Society is very clear. This isn't about making something that looks close enough. It's about honoring the original builders, maintaining historical authenticity, preserving a tradition of craftsmanship that's almost extinct. That's why Ray's here. What's your background? Jake asked Raymond, his tone still slightly challenging. Like, did you go to woodworking school or something? Navy, Raymond said simply. Seabees, 61st Naval Construction Battalion. Spent 30 years building things in places where there were no hardware stores, no lumber yards, and definitely no CNC routers. You learned to work with what you had, and you learned to do it right the first time, because there were no second chances. That shifted something in the room. Even Jake straightened slightly at the mention of military service. After I retired, Raymond continued, I did restoration work, historic buildings, antique furniture, museum pieces, things that couldn't be replaced if you messed them up, things that mattered. He looked up at the damaged staircase, his eyes tracing the missing sections. This matters. This building was here before any of us were born, and it'll be here after we're gone. Our job is to make sure it survives that transition with dignity. Bill clapped his hands together. All right, Ray, I've set up a workspace for you in the East Wing. Good light, isolated from the main construction noise. Everything you requested should be there. Jake, I need you to focus your crew on the structural work, the systems, the things they're actually good at. Leave the decorative woodwork to the specialist. Got it, boss? Jake hesitated, then extended his hand to Raymond. Welcome to the site, Mr. Fischer. Sorry about the comments earlier. Raymond shook his hand. No apology necessary. You didn't know. Now you do. As they parted ways, Jake back to his crew, Raymond to his workspace, Bill walked alongside the older man. They're good kids, Bill said apologetically. Just young. They think new is always better. Most young? People do, Raymond replied. It's not wrong exactly. New tools are better at a lot of things. Faster, more consistent, easier to use. But there are still some things that require a human touch. Some things that can't be rushed or automated. Like this staircase. They reached the East Wing workspace, and Raymond smiled when he saw it. Bill had delivered exactly what he'd asked for. Good natural light from high windows, a solid workbench, electrical outlets for limited power tools, and most importantly, space. Room to lay out materials, to work without crowding, to think. Raymond set down his toolbox and began unpacking. Each tool came out with reverence, not worship, but respect. These were instruments that had served him faithfully for decades, extensions of his hands and will. Bill watched for a moment, then asked the question that had been bothering him. Ray, can you really do this? The Preservation Society is breathing down my neck. The budget's tight, and if we don't get this right, the whole project could fall apart. I believe in you, but those kids out there have tools that cost more than my truck. You've got tools my grandfather would recognize. Can you really match the original work? Raymond looked up from arranging his chisels, 12 of them, ranging from 1/4 inch to 2 inches wide, each sharpened to a mirror finish. Bill, I spent 3 years in Okinawa building structures that needed to withstand typhoons using hand tools and salvage materials. I built a chapel in Afghanistan that's still standing, despite everything that's happened there since. I've restored furniture for the Smithsonian that was built by colonial masters. He picked up one of his planes, sighting down its sole. I can do this, but I need time, I need quiet, and I need people to trust the process instead of expecting instant results. How long? For the complete staircase restoration? 6 weeks, maybe 8. Bill winced. The schedule says 4 weeks. The schedule's wrong. Raymond's voice was gentle but firm. You can have it fast, or you can have it right. You can't have both. Bill rubbed his face, calculating costs and delays and angry phone calls from the Preservation Society. Finally, he nodded. 8 weeks, I'll make it work. But, Ray, I need you to understand. Those kids out there, they're going to watch you. They're going to judge every cut, every joint, every decision you make. And if you can't deliver something extraordinary, something that justifies the time and the faith I'm putting in you. I know, Raymond said quietly. I'll deliver. I always do. Ace T2. The first week was quiet. Raymond worked alone in his workshop, while the main crew handled structural repairs, electrical upgrades, and plumbing modifications. The sound of their work filtered through the building. Drills, saws, the pneumatic pop, pop, pop of nail guns, the rumble of equipment. Raymond's work sounded different. The whisper of a hand, plane taking gossamer-thin shavings off oak, the precise tap of mallet on chisel, the rhythmic rasp of sandpaper worked by hand, following the grain, feeling for imperfections that no machine could detect. He started with the balusters. The originals had been turned on a lathe, but each one showed evidence of hand finishing, subtle variations, intentional asymmetries, the kind of details that made mass production impossible. Raymond set up his spring pole lathe, a design unchanged since medieval times, and began turning new balusters from carefully selected oak stock. Jake wandered by on the third day, drawn by curiosity. He watched Raymond work the lathe, his foot pumping the treadle that spun the wood, his hands guiding the chisel with micro-adjustments that seemed to anticipate the wood's behavior. That's insane, Jake said, not unkindly. We could bang out 50 of those in an hour with the CNC lathe. And they'd all be identical, Raymond replied, not stopping his work. These need to be similar, not identical. The eye can tell the difference, even if the brain can't articulate why. But why does it matter? Who's going to notice? Raymond stopped the lathe, examining the baluster with critical eyes. The building will notice. The space will feel right, or it won't. People won't know why, but they'll feel it. That's the difference between a restoration and a reproduction. Jake picked up one of the completed balusters, turning it in his hands. The wood was silk smooth, the curves flowing with organic grace. How long did this take you? 3 hours. 3 hours for one baluster? We need 48 of them. I know. That's like 6 weeks just for balusters. 4 weeks, Raymond corrected. I get faster as I find the rhythm, and it's worth it. Jake set down the baluster carefully. I don't get it. I mean, I see that it's nice work, but it just seems inefficient. Efficiency isn't the only virtue, Raymond said, returning to his lathe. Sometimes quality matters more than speed. Word spread through the crew. The old man in the east wing was spending 3 hours per baluster, making newel posts from single pieces of oak that cost more than their monthly beer budget, using tools that belonged in museums. Some thought he was crazy. Some thought Bill was crazy for hiring him, but some, a few, started stopping by during breaks, watching Raymond work with fascination they couldn't quite explain. By the second week, Raymond had a small audience most afternoons, young workers who'd grown up with power tools, who'd been taught that faster was always better, watching a master craftsman work at a pace that seemed impossibly slow, but produced results that seemed impossibly perfect. One afternoon, a worker named Marcus, late 20s, quiet, observant, asked if he could try the hand plane. Raymond showed him how to hold it, how to let the tool do the work, how to read the wood grain to know which direction to plane. Marcus's first pass was rough, the plane chattering and digging. His second was better. By the fifth pass, he was starting to feel it, the satisfaction of a perfectly set blade taking a transparent shaving, leaving glass-smooth wood behind. This is actually kind of zen, Marcus said, surprised. It is, Raymond agreed. There's a meditation to handwork. Your mind has to be present, focused. You can't phone it in. Why'd you stop using power tools? Another worker asked. You must have them, right? Like, for rough work? Raymond nodded toward the corner, where a small collection of power tools sat. A table saw, a router, a drill press. I use them for rough dimensioning, for repetitive cuts, for things where they make sense. But for the final work, for the parts that matter, I use hand tools because they give me control that power tools can't match. I can feel the wood, respond to it, make decisions in real time. Jake had been listening from the doorway. "But you're one old guy, no offense. What happens when you're gone? Who's going to do this kind of work?" The question landed heavier than Jake probably intended. Raymond was quiet for a moment, his hands still on the plane. "That's the tragedy, isn't it? This knowledge, these skills, they're dying. There are maybe 100 people left in this country who can do this level of traditional woodworking. When we're gone, it's gone. Buildings like this won't be restored properly. They'll be approximated, faked, covered over with modern materials that look close enough to people who don't know better." "So teach us," Marcus said impulsively. "I mean, if you're worried about it dying out, teach people." "I've tried," Raymond said quietly. "Taught classes, took on apprentices, but it's hard. It takes years to get good, decades to get great. And we live in a world that wants results now, that values speed over mastery. Most people quit after a few months when they realize how long the road is." "Did you have someone who taught you?" Raymond's expression shifted, something old and painful moving behind his eyes. "My father. He was a Finnish carpenter, worked on buildings all over the East Coast, taught me to respect wood, to understand that every board has a story, that craftsmanship is about patience and attention and caring enough to do things right, even when no one's watching." "Is he still around?" "Died in 1982, fell from scaffolding on a job site. I was serving overseas, didn't make it back in time." Raymond's voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. "When I came home for the funeral, his crew showed me the work he'd been doing, a courthouse restoration. The crown molding he'd been installing was so perfect, so precise, that it looked like it had grown there. That was his legacy, not words or medals or recognition, just work that would outlast him." The workshop had gone very quiet. Even Jake looked uncomfortable, recognizing that he'd stumbled into something deeper than a debate about tools. "I had a son," Raymond continued, not looking at any of them, his hands moving over the wood almost unconsciously. "Michael, smart kid, good with his hands. I tried to teach him the trade, but he wanted nothing to do with it. Said hand tools were obsolete, that real craftsmen used technology. We fought about it. Said things we couldn't take back." He paused, taking a breath. "He became a software engineer, made more money in a year than I made in 5. We didn't talk much. I was proud of him, but disappointed, if that makes sense. Felt like a betrayal of the tradition, of what my father taught me." "What happened?" Marcus asked softly. "He died 7 years ago. Heart attack at 43, sitting at his desk writing code. Too much stress, too much work, too little attention to his health." Raymond's hands had stopped moving now. At his funeral, his boss gave this speech about how brilliant he was, how many programs he'd written, how much code, and I kept thinking, in 50 years, all that code will be obsolete, replaced by newer systems, better algorithms. But the buildings my father worked on, the buildings I work on, they're still here, still serving people, still beautiful. "I'm sorry," Jake said, and meant it. "Me too." Raymond picked up his plane again, finding comfort in the familiar weight. "I'm sorry we never found a way to understand each other. I'm sorry I couldn't see that his path had value even if it wasn't my path. I'm sorry I wasted time being disappointed instead of just being present." He took a breath and looked up at the young workers watching him. "That's why I still do this, why I take jobs like this even though I could retire, could spend my days fishing or traveling or whatever old men do. Because someone has to remember, someone has to carry the tradition forward, and maybe, just maybe, one of you will catch the bug. Will see that there's value in work that can't be rushed, that requires mastery, that connects you to generations of craftsmen who came before." Marcus stepped forward. "Teach me. I mean it. I'll stay after hours, weekends, whatever. Teach me how to do this." Raymond studied him carefully. "It's hard work, frustrating. You'll want to quit." "I won't quit. Your hands will hurt. Your back will hurt. You'll spend hours on something that a machine could approximate in minutes." "I understand." Raymond held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Tomorrow, after your shift, come back here. Bring patience and humility. Leave your power tools at home." Act 3. 4 weeks into the project, Raymond had completed 36 balusters, 2 newel posts, and had begun the intricate work on the crown molding. The pieces were laid out in his workshop, like artifacts in a museum, each one a small masterpiece of traditional craftsmanship. Marcus had been coming every evening, learning the basics, how to sharpen chisels to a razor edge, how to set a plane for gossamer thin shavings, how to read wood, grain and work with it instead of against it. He was improving, but slowly, and Raymond could see the frustration building. "I don't get it," Marcus said one evening, staring at a piece of wood he'd been planing for 20 minutes that still wasn't right. I'm doing exactly what you showed me, but it's not working. You're doing the motions, Raymond corrected gently. That's not the same as understanding. Watch. He took the plane, ran it over the wood, produced a perfect shaving, handed it back to Marcus. Try again, but this time, stop thinking about the plane. Think about the wood. What's it telling you? Wood doesn't talk, doesn't it? Feel how it resists here, where the grain changes direction? That's the wood talking. It's saying, change your approach, adjust your angle. Listen to it. Marcus tried again, and this time, something clicked. The plane took a clean shaving, and his face lit up. I felt it. I actually felt it. There you go. That's the beginning. Jake wandered in, carrying 2 coffee cups. He'd started stopping by more regularly, ostensibly to check on progress, but really to watch Raymond work. The mockery was gone now, replaced by something closer to respect, or at least curiosity. How's the student doing? Jake asked, handing Marcus one of the coffees. Better. He's starting to feel it. Raymond accepted the second coffee gratefully. How's the main construction going? Good. We're ahead of schedule on the structural work. The electrical, the HVAC. Bill's happy. Jake paused. He asked about you yesterday. Asked if you were going to hit the 8-week timeline. I will. It's been 4 weeks and you're not halfway done. I'm exactly where I need to be. Raymond sipped his coffee, then gestured to the completed pieces. The second half goes faster. I've found the rhythm now. Understand the wood? The first pieces always take longest. Jake walked among the balusters, examining them closely. These are insane, man. Like, seriously. I showed photos to my dad. He did construction for 30 years, and he said he'd never seen anything like it. Said it was like the difference between a photograph and a painting. Your dad understands. He also said I should pay more attention, learn something before it's lost forever. Jake looked uncomfortable. He was pretty pissed that I'd been giving you shit, actually. Reminded me that just because something's old doesn't mean it's obsolete. Smart man. Yeah. Jake sat down on a workbench. Can I ask you something? Why does it matter? I mean, really, this building, this staircase. Who's going to notice the difference between hand-carved and CNC routed? Most people can't even tell. So, why put in all this extra time and effort? Raymond set down his coffee and picked up one of the completed newel posts. Come here. Really look at this. Jake moved closer, studying the carved acanthus leaves that spiraled up the post. Under Raymond's guidance, he started to see things he'd missed before. The way the depth varied, creating play of light and shadow. The slight asymmetry that made it feel organic rather than mechanical. The texture, so smooth it seemed to flow under his fingers. A machine could copy the shape, Raymond explained. But see these tiny variations? These happen because the chisel encountered a knot here, a change in grain there, and I had to adjust, make decisions, respond to what the wood was telling me. Those decisions, those responses, they're what give this life. They're what make it art instead of just manufacturing. But again, who notices? The space notices, the building notices. When you walk into a room that's full of handcrafted details versus manufactured ones, you feel it, even if you can't articulate why. There's a warmth, a humanity, a sense that someone cared enough to do it right. That matters. Raymond set down the newel post. When my father died, I went to the courthouse he'd been working on. I stood in that entry hall and looked at the molding he'd installed, and I could see him in it. His decisions, his care, his pride in doing good work. 70 years from now, someone might stand in this library and look at this staircase, and they'll see me. Not my name, not my face, but my hands, my choices, my commitment to honoring the tradition. He turned to face Jake directly. That's why it matters? Because we're not just building things. We're leaving traces of ourselves behind. Proof that we were here, that we cared, that we understood that some things are worth doing right even when nobody's watching. The three of them stood in the workshop, surrounded by the physical evidence of that philosophy. Wood transformed through patience and skill into something that transcended its material nature. I want to learn too, Jake said suddenly. Not as intensively as Marcus, I don't have time, but basics, enough to understand what I'm looking at, enough to respect it properly. Raymond smiled. All right, tomorrow night, both of you. We'll start with sharpening. Over the next 2 weeks, the evening sessions grew. Other workers started joining, drawn by curiosity or genuine interest, or just the sense that something important was happening in the East Wing. Raymond taught them basics, sharpening, planning, reading grain. Most wouldn't stick with it, he knew, but maybe 1 or 2 would catch the spark. Marcus was showing real promise. His movements were becoming more confident, his understanding deeper. One evening, Raymond let him rough out a baluster under supervision. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. Genuinely good. You've got the touch, Raymond told him. You could do this professionally if you wanted. Marcus looked at the baluster in his hands, then at Raymond. I think I do want to. I mean, not give up construction entirely, but maybe specialize. Restoration work, historical buildings, stuff that matters. It's not an easy path. Nothing worth doing is. Raymond felt something crack open in his chest, a grief he'd been carrying for 7 years since Michael died. Here was a young man who wanted to learn, who was willing to put in the time, who understood that mastery couldn't be rushed. The son he'd wished for, arriving too late, but arriving nonetheless. There's something I need to show you, Raymond said quietly. He reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small wooden box, opened it carefully. Inside was a set of carving chisels, 12 of them, each one perfectly maintained. These were my father's, Raymond explained. He got them from his father, who brought them from Germany in 1923. They've been cutting wood for over a century. I was supposed to pass them to Michael, but... He paused, pushing through the tightness in his throat. He never wanted them, never understood their value. Marcus looked at the chisels with reverence. They're beautiful. They're tools, Raymond corrected. Beautiful, yes, but meant to be used. I've been using them for 40 years, maintaining them, keeping them sharp. But I'm 79 years old. My hands are steady now, but they won't be forever. He looked at Marcus directly. I'd like you to have them. Not now, you're not ready. But when this project's done, when you've proven to me and yourself that you're serious about this path, they should go to someone who'll use them, honor them, pass them forward. Marcus's eyes went wide. Mr. Fischer, I can't. That's too much. It's exactly right. Raymond closed the box gently. My father's legacy lived in his work. I'm trying to do the same. But legacies need caretakers, need people to carry them forward. That's what you're learning to be. Jake had been watching this exchange quietly. Mr. Fischer, can I ask, do you regret it? The fight with your son? The time you lost? Raymond was quiet for a long moment. Every day. I regret that I was so rigid, so convinced that my way was the only way that mattered. Michael was brilliant at what he did, and I couldn't see past my disappointment that he wasn't following my path. By the time I realized how wrong I'd been, he was gone. He picked up his plane, ran his thumb over the blade, automatically checking its sharpness. That's the cost of perfectionism, of being so focused on preserving tradition that you can't make space for other kinds of value. I lost my son because I couldn't bend, couldn't adapt, couldn't understand that there are many ways to leave a mark on the world. But you're bending now, Marcus pointed out, teaching us, passing it forward. I am, Raymond agreed. Better late than never, I suppose. Though I wish I'd learned it sooner. The workshop fell quiet except for the sound of Marcus's plane whispering over oak, each stroke taking him closer to understanding what Raymond had spent a lifetime learning. That craftsmanship was more than technique. That tradition was about wisdom passed hand to hand, generation to generation, and that the greatest work wasn't just in wood or stone, but in the connections forged between people who shared a commitment to doing things right. Ace to Spore. The legacy. 8 weeks after Raymond had started work, the grand staircase was complete. The new sections married to the old so seamlessly that even the Preservation Society's expert needed several minutes to identify where original ended and restoration began. Bill had organized a soft opening, invited the crew, the Preservation Society, some city council members, and local press. The building wasn't finished, but the staircase was, and it deserved to be celebrated. Raymond stood to the side as people filed in, watching them react to the work. He saw the moment they noticed it, the slight widening of eyes, the unconscious pause, the hand reaching out to touch the newel post, before remembering that this was art as much as architecture. The Preservation Society director, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hammond, spent 20 minutes examining the staircase with a jeweler's loupe and a measuring tape. When she finally turned to Bill, her eyes were wet. "It's perfect," she said simply. "Not just close, not just good enough. Perfect." Whoever did this understood the original builder's intent, matched not just the form, but the spirit. She looked around. "Where's your craftsman?" Bill gestured to Raymond, who stepped forward reluctantly. Dr. Hammond studied him, the weathered face, the scarred hands, the simple work clothes, and something shifted in her expression from professional appreciation to personal awe. "You did this," she said. Not a question. "I did. 48 balusters, 3 newel posts, 60 linear feet of crown molding, all hand-carved, all hand-finished, all perfect. How? Time and attention," Raymond said simply, "and tools that have been doing this kind of work for 100 years." She shook his hand with both of hers, holding on. "On behalf of the Preservation Society, on behalf of everyone who cares about maintaining our architectural heritage, thank you. This is extraordinary work, museum-quality work." Jake stepped forward, his earlier mockery now transformed into genuine pride. "Dr. Hammond, if I can add something, Mr. Fischer didn't just restore this staircase. He's been teaching us, a bunch of young construction workers who thought power tools were the answer to everything. He's shown us that there's value in traditional methods, in taking time, in understanding that some things can't be rushed." Marcus joined them, carrying the wooden box containing Raymond's father's chisels. "And he's passing forward a tradition that was dying, teaching us not just techniques but philosophy. That craftsmanship is about more than the end product. It's about the attention and care you bring to every moment of the process." Dr. Hammond looked between the young workers and Raymond with understanding. "That's the real preservation, isn't it? Not just the buildings, but the knowledge, the skills, the wisdom." "It is," Raymond agreed. "Buildings can be restored, but once the knowledge is lost, it's gone forever." Bill raised his voice to address the gathering. "I want everyone to take a moment to really appreciate what you're seeing here. This staircase represents something rare, a commitment to excellence over expedience, to authenticity over approximation, to honoring tradition while serving the present. Raymond Fischer spent 8 weeks creating something that will serve this building for another century. And in the process, he reminded all of us what it means to be a craftsman." The applause was genuine and sustained. Raymond accepted it with quiet grace, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding its necessity. Sometimes you had to let people celebrate good work, not for your ego, but to reinforce that such work had value, deserved recognition, mattered. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed and workers began cleaning up, Raymond found himself alone with Marcus and Jake. The two young men had become regular fixtures in his workshop, learning and growing, and beginning to understand what a lifetime of craftsmanship looked like. "What's next for you?" Jake asked. "Another restoration project?" "Maybe," Raymond said. "Bill mentioned a church in the historic district that needs work. Altar rails, pews, some carved panels. Similar era, similar challenges." He looked at Marcus. "Depending on how my apprentice here develops, I might not have to do it alone." Marcus's face lit up. "You mean it? You'd let me work with you professionally? If you're willing to keep learning, to put in the time, to understand that this path takes years to walk properly, then yes, I could use the help. And the tradition needs carriers." Jake looked wistful. "I wish I had the time to go that deep, but I'm committed to my crew, to the work we do, though I'll never look at it the same way again." "You don't have to abandon what you do," Raymond said. "Just bring more awareness to it. Understand that speed isn't the only virtue, that efficiency isn't the only goal. Even with power tools and modern methods, you can approach work with craftsmanship in mind, with care, with the understanding that what you build will outlast you." "I can do that," Jake promised. Raymond reached into his toolbox and pulled out a hand plane, not one of his finest, but a good solid Stanley Bailey No. 4, properly tuned and sharp. He handed it to Jake. "For when you want to slow down, for when you need to really feel the wood instead of just processing it. Use it, maintain it, pass it forward when the time comes." Jake accepted the plane with reverence. "Thank you. I'll take care of it." "I know you will." As the sun set through the library's restored windows, casting long shadows across the new staircase, the three men stood together in comfortable silence. Raymond thought about his father, about the courthouse molding that still stood 70 years later, about Michael and the conversations they never had, the understanding they never reached. But he also thought about Marcus, who wanted to learn, about Jake, who was learning to see, about all the young workers who'd stopped by the workshop over the past weeks, watching and asking questions and beginning to understand that there were different kinds of value in the world. The tradition would go on, not unchanged, nothing ever stayed static, but transformed, adapted, carried forward by people who understood that some things couldn't be rushed, couldn't be automated, couldn't be faked. As they left the building, Marcus turned back for one last look at the staircase. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "Really beautiful." "It is," Raymond agreed. "And in 100 years, when we're all gone, it'll still be beautiful, still serving, still standing as proof that someone cared enough to do it right." They walked out into the evening, 3 generations of builders connected by wood and tools and the understanding that true craftsmanship was about more than skill. It was about legacy, about passing forward wisdom that couldn't be written down or programmed, only demonstrated, practiced, and lived. Closing, the Carnegie Library reopened to the public 6 months later. The local newspaper ran a feature story with photographs of the restored staircase, calling it a masterpiece of traditional craftsmanship in an age of modern shortcuts. Raymond Fischer's name appeared in the article, but not prominently. He preferred it that way. The work should speak for itself. Marcus Delgado quit his job with the general contractor 3 months after the library project finished. He apprenticed formally with Raymond, spending 2 years learning the depth and breadth of traditional woodworking. They worked together on the church project, on a historic hotel restoration, on museum-quality furniture pieces that were displayed in galleries. When Raymond's hands finally began to fail, arthritis and age taking their inevitable toll, Marcus was ready. Not to replace him, never that, but to carry forward, to be the next link in the chain. On Raymond's 82nd birthday, Marcus gave him a gift, a wooden box containing a new set of carving chisels. High carbon steel, perfectly balanced, made by a modern craftsman who still understood that some tools deserved to be made by hand. For your collection, Marcus said, to pass forward when you're ready. Raymond examined them with expert eyes, testing edges, feeling weight and balance. These are exceptional. I know, I made them. Raymond looked up sharply. Marcus smiled. You taught me woodworking. I wanted to learn toolmaking too. Spent the last year studying with a blacksmith, learning to forge and temper steel. These are my journeyman pieces, the ones I'm proud enough to sign. He pointed to tiny stamps on each handle. MD 2024. Raymond felt his chest tighten with emotion he didn't try to hide. You made these yourself. The tradition goes both ways, right? You taught me about wood. Now I can make tools worthy of the wood, can teach others, can keep the whole ecosystem alive. That night, Raymond added Marcus's chisels to his collection, not to use, though they were certainly fine enough, but to preserve, to honor, to remember this moment when a student surpassed the teacher, when the tradition proved strong enough to branch and grow. Jake Hendricks, meanwhile, stayed with general construction, but he became known for something unusual in the industry, attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. His crew worked faster than most with their modern tools, but they also worked better. Corners were actually square. Joints were actually tight. Finishes were actually finished. When other contractors asked what changed, Jake would shrug and say he'd learned from a master that speed and quality weren't opposites. They just required different kinds of attention. He kept Raymond's hand plane in his truck, used it regularly, maintained it carefully. And when his own son turned 18 and started asking about construction work, Jake taught him to use it first, before touching any power tools. You need to understand what you're doing before you automate it, Jake explained, echoing lessons learned in a workshop smelling of wood shavings and linseed oil. Need to feel the wood, respect it, work with it instead of just processing it. His son complained that it was slow, inefficient, old-fashioned. Jake smiled. That's what I said too. But trust me, learn this first. Learn to do it right. The modern tools will still be there when you understand the fundamentals. The Carnegie Library became something of a pilgrimage site for craftsmen and preservation enthusiasts. People came from across the country to see the staircase, to study Raymond's work, to understand what traditional craftsmanship looked like at its finest. Dr. Hammond gave tours sometimes, pointing out details that casual observers missed. The way the balusters varied just enough to feel organic. The depth of the carving on the newel posts. The precision of the joinery that would hold for centuries. This was built by a man named Raymond Fischer, she would say, a master craftsman from a dying tradition who took the time to do it right, who understood that some things can't be rushed, can't be automated, can't be faked, and who taught a new generation to care about such things. One of those tours included a young woman named Sarah Fischer, Raymond's daughter, who'd flown in from Seattle specifically to see her father's work. She stood at the base of the staircase, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding something about her father that 40-plus years hadn't taught her. He'd tried to explain it when she was young, why he spent so many hours in his workshop, why he cared so much about old buildings and traditional methods, why he'd been so disappointed when Michael chose software over woodworking. She'd thought it was just stubbornness, resistance to change, old man syndrome. But looking at this staircase, feeling the craftsmanship in every detail, understanding that her father had created something that would outlast them all, she finally got it. It wasn't about tools or techniques or tradition for tradition's sake. It was about caring enough to do things right, about understanding that your work was your legacy, that what you built would speak for you long after you were gone, about connecting to something larger than yourself, generations of craftsmen who'd come before, generations who would come after, all bound by the understanding that true mastery required patience, attention, and the humility to serve the work instead of your ego. She called him that night from her hotel room. "Dad, I saw the staircase today. What did you think?" His voice was careful, uncertain. "I think it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell Michael, what you've been trying to tell me my whole life. Sarah, I'm sorry it took me so long to get it. Sorry I didn't understand why it mattered to you. Sorry about all the times I dismissed it as just your hobby or your obsession. You don't need to apologize. I do, though, because you built something that will be here in 100 years, something that matters. And I never appreciated what that meant until I saw it with my own eyes." They talked for an hour, really talked, in a way they hadn't since she was a child, about her work in tech, about his work in wood, about Michael and the conversations that never happened, the understanding that came too late. "I wish he could have seen this," Sarah said finally. "Me too," Raymond agreed. "But I like to think he knows somehow, that he understands now what I couldn't explain then. I think he does." After they hung up, Raymond sat in his workshop, quieter now, as arthritis made long days impossible, and looked at his tools. The planes and chisels and saws that had served him for decades. The wooden toolbox his father had built, still solid after 80 years. Marcus's chisels in their place of honor. He thought about the staircase at the Carnegie Library, about the church altar rails, about all the pieces scattered across the country bearing his mark. Not his signature, craftsmen didn't sign their work like that, but his care, his attention, his commitment to doing things right. And he thought about Marcus, who was out there right now carrying the tradition forward. About Jake, who'd learned to value quality over speed. About all the young workers who'd stopped by his workshop and absorbed some small piece of the wisdom that couldn't be written down, only demonstrated and practiced and lived. The tradition would survive, changed, adapted, transformed by new contexts and new technologies, but alive, breathing, growing. That was enough. More than enough, it was everything. At 85, Raymond Fischer died quietly in his sleep, his hands finally stilled after 67 years of crafting wood into art. His funeral was well attended. Family, fellow craftsmen, former students, people who'd never met him but had seen his work and understood what it represented. Marcus gave the eulogy. He talked about the hours in the workshop, the lessons about patience and attention and respecting materials, about the way Raymond could read wood like others read books, understanding its nature and working with it instead of against it. He taught us that mastery takes time, Marcus said, that some things can't be rushed or automated or faked, that true craftsmanship is about more than skill. It's about character, about caring enough to do things right when nobody's watching, when nobody will ever know the difference except you. He paused, his voice thickening. Raymond Fischer left us a legacy written in wood and joinery and attention to detail. But more than that, he left us an understanding that our work matters, that what we build, what we create, what we care enough to do properly, those things outlast us. They speak for us when we're gone. They connect us to something larger than ourselves. And he taught us to pass it forward, to take what we've learned and share it, to keep the chain unbroken, to ensure that future generations have access to the wisdom that previous generations earned. After the service, people gathered at the Carnegie Library. Where else? Standing at the base of the grand staircase that would forever be Raymond Fischer's monument, not in bronze or marble, but in oak and expertise and the timeless beauty of work done right. Marcus touched the newel post gently, feeling the carved acanthus leaves under his fingers. Somewhere in his workshop, he had wood selected and ready, tools sharpened and waiting. A new project was beginning, another restoration, another opportunity to honor the tradition. He thought about Raymond's hands guiding his own those first awkward days, about the patience it took to teach someone to see wood as more than material, to understand that every board had character, every joint had purpose, every decision mattered, and he smiled because he knew what came next. Tomorrow, a young carpenter was coming to his workshop, someone curious, someone willing to learn, someone ready to discover that there were kinds of value the modern world had forgotten. Marcus would teach her the way Raymond taught him, patiently, carefully, with respect for the tradition and hope for the future. The chain would continue. The legacy would live, the work would go on, and somewhere, in workshops and on job sites and in the quiet spaces where craftsmen labored over details nobody else would notice, Raymond Fischer's influence would ripple forward, Not loud or flashy or demanding attention, just present, constant, true, the way he'd always been, the way the work required, the way traditions survived, one careful cut at a time, one patient lesson at a time, one generation passing wisdom to